It's really my great honor and privilege and pleasure as well to read here tonight, to be here virtually at the Alaska Museum and to read for, excuse me, Alaska Quarterly Review and its editor, Ron Spatz, uh, that have provided a forum venue for poets, fiction writers, artists, creative nonfiction writers, photographers, essayists, a magazine that's both enduring and consistently showing a kind of intellectual curiosity with each new issue, and a magazine and editor that have been particularly generous to me as well. And so I'm very grateful. And thank you, Heather, also for your introduction. I'm going to be reading poems tonight from my new book, The Lookout Man, which will be out at the end of March. And I'll start with Lines of the Prodigal. I go back to the street I grew up on to see if the house I grew up in still stands. But new people tore down our cottage by the cold green sea and built themselves something large like a huge coconut cake on a tiny dessert plate, not at all like our house that fit just right. My picture window faced the sea, where the sun rose and I was the sun in a gold painted room now gone. No one sought my advice or permission. They would not have found me if they tried to ask whether they could alter this crucial evidence of my past for eternity. I knew when I woke the paint that lit my room was not real gold. I could say I once was a happy boy inside, but won't. Lines about ships at sea. People who live inland forget about ships at sea. Their massive smokestacks and tall decks, light towers, ramps, and nimble cranes, bridges, conning towers, and the high keels, terrifying on the open sea to behold. The stinky ones carting trash, the tuna canning factories afloat, Japanese whalers with their eternal bad karma, battleships, aircraft carriers, transports, trawlers, freighters, barges, container vessels, and supertankers carrying LNG. Semi illuminated, the ocean liners wait at dawn outside the port for the armada of tugboats. Down the gangplank goes the procession of passengers and crew. The captain has a pleasant smile and keeps his hand locked in a permanent wave like Admiral Byrd frozen at the pole. On other piers, stevedores and forklift operators transfer the cargo to the acres of metal warehouses beside the gas farm. Picture the ancient crafts adrift in the mind, caravels and square riggers, argosts, barks, and brigantines, windjammers, schooners, clippers, and galleons, and the vile slavers and rum runners. Pirates still board craft in the Persian Gulf and off the Horn of Africa, but it's oil they're after, not gold. Yet the odd yacht is sometimes found, renamed and painted, the fate of its owners guessed at with throat cutting gestures. People who live inland forget about ships at sea. The storms on the prairie only slow the interstates. Sometimes in the night, one hears the whistle of a train, but it's nothing like the horn of a ship in the fog at sea. Lines about mountains. I just learned that mountains kill more people climbing down them than making their brave ascent, and that some have the oldest rocks on the earth. Small wonder they crumble into avalanches, having weathered eons to fall. Mountains must get tired with so many people climbing them and bored with the endless boot prints of alpinists in bright garb, the flagpoles jammed into crags, piton and foothold, the kick of the crampon, metal ladders across crevasses. More climbers die each summer on Mont Blanc than all the Himalayas, its summit not as perilous but more frequented than Everest or K2. I conclude the nearer mountain is far more dangerous than the distant one, just as we are more likely to be killed by the hands of someone we know. It's not so pleasant. Lines about rivers, then the sea. I don't like to swim in rivers. Their lengths and bends trouble me. If my chest touched against river weeds, I would panic. No, I don't like to swim in rivers, but I admire them for being relentless. Even blind rivers buried under cities are rivers that run just a few days a year. Some rivers create borders between states and nations. Some rivers stray from their courses or are dammed from flowing to neighbors. I very much like the word estuary and the thought of boats at low tide there. And I appreciate how a river divides Pest from Buda, Minneapolis from St. Paul, or the banks someone decided were left and right. A current is like a river in the sea. When I was small, I lived along the beach. When I got caught in a riptide, a passing wave brought me home. Lines about the wind. All fuss and bluster, the wind is busy. It has a long way to go across the wide seas in one long breath, clearing its throat down the avenues of commerce. The wind is master of the clouds, sends scraps and dust along the highways. The wind can be fresh and the wind can be ill. Everyone has mixed feelings about the wind. The Scirocco, the Santa Ana, and the Mistral, which sounds like mistress and minstrel, all make you crazy. You can blame the wind when you hate your job or beat your kids, go off with your colleague for a dirty weekend. But no one likes it when the wind quits and stops the chimes in the park and stalls the sailboats in the public fountains, and the blades cease spinning on the prairie, and gutter leaves halt running toward erosion. And no breeze lifts the horse's tail or dries the sweat on a baby's neck. The letter carrier has left his little truck open. The wind is blowing away my debts. Two more poems. This one's from my friend Lucy Brock-Broido. I don't know why, except I think she would have laughed at it. So it's called Lines in the Backyard. Have you seen the lights in the windows of the trees? No one is at home there unless you count what's wild. Do you know the names of everyone asleep in your leaves? I am not just talking about genus and species. It's hard work keeping up with the new ones, or those passing through the yard for the night. Once I saw an owl perched on a low-limbed tree. I never did get its name because it took off soon. Jake the vole rode its talons to the stars. He never came back, but a new Jake lives here now. Lines along a wild place. And thank you again for inviting me to be part of this evening. I walked through the enterprise of weeds. A crow for each of us stood mounted on a fence. Sometimes I miss everyone I ever loved when their faces reflect in the hard, wide leaves of the magnolia, their names like blossoms and their lives once so real and fragrant, now like handkerchiefs beneath the trees. If my dog were still alive, he might piss on them, and I would have to yell at him not to if anyone were around. If anyone were around, I would say I had momentous news to tell, but forget what it is. I will ask the dogwoods to remind me what it means to live along the edges of the woods, to be promiscuous but bear white flowers. Thank you.